Well, she wouldn't be considered among the top candidates or favorites, not because of her skills, but because the president seems to have already fixated on a small group of people. It's Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, who said today he's going to start interviewing people around September 1st for the job. And he's the one who's talking about this expanded list that has shown up in a lot of reporting. Now, you heard from Michelle Bowman what you would expect to hear when someone is put on a list of potential candidates for a job. They don't want to jinx it or talk about it in any way publicly. So it's hard to know whether she's a serious candidate in her mind or not. But I suspect that we're still looking at one of the Kevins or a Chris Waller kind of person, although it is Donald Trump, so anything can happen.
All right. Well, in the meantime, she does have her current role, and she told you that she has a big agenda, which includes overhauling big bank capital rules. Tell us about the discussion you guys had there.
Well, of course, this was all part of the Basel III international agreement on banking, and the United States is one of the few countries that hasn't yet ratified it. The Biden administration put out a 1,000-page proposal to make the rules stricter in the U.S. than in the rest of the world. The Trump administration has now junked that and are rewriting the rules to make them a little lighter on the banks. The question is, when do they get them out? The hope is relatively soon, because they have to go through a comment period and then go back to the Fed for reconsideration before they can take effect.
Okay, so let's broaden the conversation a little bit, Mike. By the way, you look really relaxed out there in Jackson.
No cowboy hat, though.
Yeah. You think I'm coming back?
Yeah, you're not coming back for a while, I know that. But that's also because you have a lot to do out there, and partly that is hearing from Fed Chair Jay Powell later this week. The conversation that we've had up to now is really focused on the potential for a September rate cut and messaging around that. What's the reporting you can bring us around that narrative?
Well, the feeling is that Powell will sort of dance around the idea of a rate cut and say that the Fed is looking at the possibility, along with the possibility of doing nothing, and it's going to depend on the data, what we get in terms of the employment report and the CPI report that'll both be out before the next Fed meeting. The employment report we had last time was disappointing and suggested maybe the economy is weakening a little bit, so you'd cut rates. But then in the last week, we got some CPI and PPI numbers that suggested we're getting a little of inflation out of the tariffs, and that might pick up as well, which would mean you would want to leave rates unchanged. So they're going to wait till the last minute, see how much data they get. And I imagine that Powell is going to disappoint investors who are looking for him to ratify the idea of a rate cut, which he did last year. He said at this meeting that it was time to cut rates, and they did in September, but maybe not this time.
What else do you expect for his speech? I remember a couple of years ago, a lot of traders were kind of parsing through the length of his speech. He had a very short speech, I think in 2022. Are there any kind of, reading the tea leaves that traders are going to be looking for Powell's next speech?
I don't think so, except for the idea of the rate cut. But it is likely he is going to at least outline what the Fed's new monetary policy framework is, how they look at the economy and determine what they're going to do going forward. Remember, the last one he announced at Jackson Hole in 2020, just before the pandemic was at its worst. And he said that unemployment at that point was continuing to fall. Inflation was very low, and they would essentially let the economy run hot for a while to try to get a maximum benefit out of the falling unemployment rate. That didn't work out very well with the inflation that came after COVID. So now every 5 years they relook at what their framework is, and now they're expected to drop some of that language and maybe go back to what we had before, which was essentially we'll do what we think is right at the time.
Mike, before we let you go, just give us an idea of what the vibes are like there. Partly, you're there for a couple different reasons. Of course, the Fed chair and his speech on Friday and all the Federal Reserve members who are there, but also this blockchain symposium that is happening. Salt and Kraken are hosting this, and you've been talking to people, you've been reporting on the ground there. What's the vibe like? What are the attitudes like? Is it different from previous years?
Well, it's my first time here, and this is only the second Wyoming blockchain conference, so I don't know how different it is, but it does have a happy vibe to it as people feel the Trump administration is very supportive of crypto, and that's a change from the way the Washington had looked at the asset before. And so they're kind of interested in what the possibilities are going forward, which is one reason they had McKee Bowman come in and speak to them. And tomorrow they'll have Chris Waller, another Fed governor, talking to them about the future of crypto. The question kind of is, does the government get into the business with a government sort of digital dollar like the Chinese have done, or do they leave it to private sector? The president has suggested the private sector would be best, and he has suggested a light touch of regulation. So people here are pretty upbeat.